بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Last week we spoke about the October War. And this was a war that was launched by Egypt and Syria jointly on October 6th, 1973. This was the 10th of Ramadan in the Islamic calendar. So Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack on Israel, and Israel was caught off guard. For the Jews, it was Yom Kippur, which is a holy day for the Jews. So they were not expecting this attack at all. And initially, Egypt and Syria were able to achieve significant victories at the beginning of the war. And we spoke about how the Egyptians were able to penetrate the Bar Lev line to get into the Sinai Peninsula. And the Israelis thought that that line was unbreachable. They thought that there's no way that anyone can penetrate that line. But the Egyptian army was able to break that line within 18 hours. Very easily they were able to break through that line. And they were able to regain control of the Suez Canal. So now that they were so easily able to penetrate the Bar Lev line, their initial plan, the Egyptians, they thought that even they themselves didn't realize how easy it would be for them to penetrate that line. They thought that that would take a lot more effort. But once they were able to easily penetrate that line, they felt that they could continue into the Sinai Peninsula and retake the whole peninsula. That was not initially part of the plan. But now that they easily breached the Bar Lev line, they thought, okay, why not continue and let us try to retake the whole Sinai Peninsula. So this was under the political leadership of the president of Egypt, Anwar Sadat. So he saw this as a way to gain political advantage as well. That if his army could successfully take back the Sinai Peninsula from the Israelis, then this would make him very popular. Anwar Sadat thought that this was something that could be of personal benefit to him. But his military commander, Sa'd ad-Din al-Shadhili, he recommended against doing this. He said, if we go further into the Sinai Peninsula, the Israelis will be able to use their planes to bombard us and to destroy our vehicles. If we try to bring our vehicles deeper into the Sinai Peninsula, yes, we're able to break the line, but if we go too deep into the Sinai Peninsula, the Israeli planes can destroy our tanks. So we need to take it a little slow. So this was the military advice by Sa'd ad-Din al-Shadhili, who was the commander of the military forces in this operation. So he thought that they should be patient and we're not ready for this. Let's wait. We don't have air cover to protect us from the Israeli army's air cover. But the Egyptian leadership, Anwar Sadat, he rejected this advice. He wanted to move forward because he thought if we can do this, if we can get it, then this would bring him great popularity amongst the people. So because of the Egyptian president's demand, they moved forward. And Israel allowed them to do so. Israel was basically luring them further because they knew that with their air power, they would be able to destroy their vehicles. So Israel allowed them to penetrate deeper into the Sinai Peninsula. And then Israel launched a counterattack, and they launched airstrikes on the Egyptian tanks. So they were able to destroy 250 Egyptian tanks. So look, the Egyptians, they had a victory at the beginning stages by breaching the Bar Lev line. But then because they were not patient and they didn't strategize properly, they lost many of their vehicles. They lost 250 tanks with this Israeli airstrike. So this was a loss after a victory. The initial stages, they were being victorious, but then it turned into a loss. Now, at the same time, while Egypt was advancing into the Sinai Peninsula, Syria, they also had some early success. They were able to occupy the Golan Heights. That's a very, very important strategic location. Up to this point, Israel had control of the Golan Heights, but Syria, the Syrian army was able to occupy the Golan Heights, and they were able to take it away from the Israelis initially. And they climbed Jabal al-Shaikh, which is a high mountain there in Golan. And they were able to rid that area of the Israeli military. They were able to remove the Israeli military from the Golan Heights. So there were significant victories for the Syrians at the beginning of this battle as well. But once the Egyptian army started to collapse in Sinai, the Syrian army, they lost their morale as well. Because they were in this together. So when they saw that, okay, the Egyptians are starting to lose now, they started to lose their morale and their resolve as well, and they crumbled as well. And they started to withdraw. So Israel was able to regain control of the Golan Heights. And in addition to regaining control of Golan, the Israeli army also occupied some new Syrian villages as well that they hadn't occupied before. They took 18 more Syrian villages, including the Golan Heights. They took 18 more villages as well. So sadly, this battle, even though it started out in a very promising way, it ended with significant losses for the Egyptian and the Syrian army. But the Israelis also suffered many casualties as well. It wasn't very easy for Israel to do this. It was not like the 1967 war, right? This one, Israel suffered a number of losses as well, right? So because of this, because the Arab army initially was able to gain success against the Israeli army, at least at the beginning, this was something that restored the spirit of resistance in the Arabs, and it restored some morale into the Arabs, right? After 1967, the war we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, where the Arab armies were very harshly defeated in a humiliating loss, right? They lost a lot of their morale after that 1967 war because it was such a humiliating defeat. But now in 1973, they were able to regain some of that morale because of the early victories that they had. The Egyptians were able to easily penetrate the Bar Lev line that the Israelis had said can never be breached, but the Egyptians were able to breach it within 18 hours. Alhamdulillah, this is something that gave them a boost of morale. Like, look, they said we couldn't do it, and we did it. And the Syrians, how they were able, even for a short time, they were able to take back the Golan Heights, and they were able to rid it of the Israeli military, at least for a certain amount of time. Right? That showed that they have the ability to do it. So it is something that really increased their morale, and that was something that, alhamdulillah, was very important at that time. And one of the reasons why the Israelis were able to regain control of the situation, one of the main reasons, is that American intelligence was providing the Israelis with precise military information about the Arab army's movements to Israel. The Americans, they were helping the Israelis, right? This is something that exists until this day. So that was going on back 50 years ago as well. The Americans, they were providing intelligence and help to the Israelis against the Arabs. And if it weren't for that American support, if it weren't for that American support for the Israelis, the Arabs likely would have been able to gain more of a victory in 1973. So this was the end of the Yom Kippur War, the October 6th, 1973 war. So it did restore some morale into the Arabs. They thought that, look, it's not a lost cause. There's still hope. We do have the ability to succeed. So on October 17th of that same year, on October 17th, 1973, the oil ministers of the Arab countries, they met in Kuwait. They had a meeting in Kuwait. And a decision was made by the Arab leaders to cut Arab oil production. Right? The Arabs are the ones who supply oil to the world. So they decided, we're going to cut oil production by 20%. This was agreed upon by the Arab rulers. We're going to cut oil production by 20%. And then after that initial cut of 20%, we're going to continue to cut oil production 5% every month until Israel withdraws from the occupied Arab territories. And the credit for this decision, it goes mainly to King Faisal ibn Abdul Aziz of Saudi Arabia. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon him. He was a great leader, and he had many honorable positions with regards to the Palestinian cause. He was a man who greatly supported the Palestinian cause, the Saudi King Faisal ibn Abdul Aziz rahmatullahi alayh. So he was the main ruler who was behind this decision of cutting the oil production. So he went ahead and he did that. And the Arab countries, the other Arab countries, they agreed with this decision as well. And they cut the production of oil. And they decided to completely cut off oil supply to any country that supports Israel. Any country that supports Israel, no oil for you. And the country that was most affected by this decision was the United States of America. The US, in 1973, suffered greatly from this decision. They suffered a lot. Anyone who was here in the United States in 1973, they can tell you about how things were. Right? Gas prices, because of the decrease of production of oil and the refusal of King Faisal to send oil to the United States, gas prices increased. They increased more than 70%. Can you imagine that? Just in one shot, in one day, gas prices increased 70%, right? So this was something that was huge, and it really affected the people here in the United States. And one of the effects of that is that before that, people used to have big cars. But because of that, many car manufacturers started to build smaller cars, because there was more demand after that for smaller cars, because they take less gas, right? So it really shifted the whole market here in the United States, right? So the people were greatly affected by that decision. The Western countries, especially the United States, had been living off of Saudi oil and Arab oil very comfortably up to this point. But now this decision, it really, really affected and impacted the people here in the United States. Also, around this period, the UN Security Council passed a resolution calling for a ceasefire and a new commencement of negotiations to stop the fighting between the Arabs and Israel and to initiate a dialogue once again. All right, so one of the main results of the 1973 war was that even though the Arabs did not get a decisive victory, they didn't really regain any of the lands that they had lost in 1967. But as we mentioned, it increased their morale. It increased their morale, and this shattered the myth that Israel is invincible. Right? After 1967, people started to think that, look, Israel is indestructible. Look at what that small country, look at how it destroyed, the armies of multiple Arab nations. Syria, Egypt, Jordan. So there was this myth of invincibility around Israel after the 1967 war. But after the 1973 war, that myth was shattered. That no, they're not invincible, and the Arabs do have the ability to fight against Israel. Because at the beginning of the battle, as we mentioned, Israel was on the verge of collapse, right? The Syrians, they were able to take back Golan. The Egyptians, they broke the Bar-Lev line, right? And if Israel had lost that war, if the Egyptian and Syrian armies if they had been able to complete that, and if Israel did not have the support of American intelligence, that would have been the end of Israel. That would have been the end of that state. Because Israel, at the end of the day, it's a military state, right? It's built on military victories. If Israel is defeated militarily, then it's finished, right? So it was reported that the Prime Minister of Israel at that time, Golda Meir, she was the Prime Minister of Israel during that time, when she heard that the Israeli army was being defeated at the beginning of that 1973 war, when she heard of those early defeats, when Syria took back Golan, and when the Egyptian army broke the Bar-Lev line, when she heard about this, she started to cry. And she realized that if they were defeated in this war, this would be the end. That would be the end of Israel. And really, without American support, they would have ended. Right? But the Americans supported them, provided them with intelligence, provided them with support, and with that support, they were able to withstand. They were able to withstand the Egyptian and the Syrian armies at the end. Also, one of the results of this is that oil proved to be a very effective weapon. It became clear after the 1973 war that oil proved to be a very effective weapon that really shook the economies of the world. And because the Arab countries decreased their production, the prices of oil went up, right? And this decision to stop oil exports to the United States, it revitalized the economies of Gulf countries. It really increased the wealth of the Arab countries because the price of oil went up, right? So the Arabs, their standard of living went up, and their budgets went up after 1973. One of the negative effects after the 1973 war was that after this war, the Arabs, they became more willing to make peace with Israel and accept them and recognize them as a nation. Specifically, Anwar Sadat, the president of Egypt, after October 6th, after that war, he was hailed as a hero, right? He was known as the October hero, right? But he exploited this popularity and this image he had as a hero, and he began to engage then with the Israelis on the side. He began to have a dialogue with them and engage with them and initiate peace processes with them, right? So instead of remaining firm against Israel and continuing to try to take back the Muslim land that was stolen, he started initiating peace processes with them. So At the end of the October War, Israel remained in control of Sinai, except for 30 kilometers east of the Suez Canal. Right? Egypt withdrew west of the canal, and there was just a symbolic Egyptian force of 7,000 soldiers east of the canal, 8 kilometers away, right? Egypt, they kept their troops there, but it was mostly just symbolic. But Israel really retained control of the Sinai Peninsula. So it was not liberated. The initial plan of the Egyptians was to liberate the Sinai Peninsula, but at the end of the day, it was not liberated. Nor was Jolan liberated. Even though the Syrians initially they were able to get Jolan back, at the end of the day, they were not able to liberate Jolan. Egypt was not able to liberate Gaza, right? So the results at the end of the day weren't much, but maybe the only benefit or the main benefit was that the myth of invincibility of Israel was destroyed, and the morale of the Arabs was increased. So after the situation settled down, Israel maintained its control throughout 1974 and beyond. And the Palestinian issue, it started to move in a different direction when the Arab countries, at a conference in October of 1974 in Ribat, the Arab countries, they recognized the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, led by Yasser Arafat. And they recognized this organization as the only legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. You are the official representative of Palestine, Yasser Arafat and the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. So this limited any other Palestinian movement, and it prevented the other Palestinian groups from any type of effort. The other Palestinian groups became basically paralyzed. They couldn't really do anything because now the sole representative, official representative of Palestine and the Palestinian people became the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. So this decision led to a decline in the Arab sentiment towards the Palestinian cause, because now the Arabs felt, okay, the other Arabs, they felt, okay, we're not responsible for this cause anymore. They have their own movement. The responsibility for the Palestinian cause now lies only on the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. They are the ones who are responsible for the Palestinian cause. So the other Arab nations, they kind of withdrew from feeling responsible for that cause anymore. So the sentiment was kind of lost after 1974. Yasser Arafat, he became the official representative of Palestine because he was the head of the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. And he was actually invited to the United Nations to deliver a speech as the official representative of the Palestinian people. And the PLO, the organization that was led by Yasser Arafat, was actually accepted as a non-member observer state at the UN, right? So now the PLO, they have an international stage. They are officially recognized as the official representative of Palestine and the Palestinian people. And the other movements within Palestine and outside of Palestine kind of lost their steam. Now the PLO charter and also the charter of Al-Fath stated that initially they stated that the only option that we have is the military option, that we have to take back Palestinian land through military action. That was part of their charter. That was part of their charter, that they were not interested in compromising and allowing Israel to have some land and Palestinians to have some land. No. Their charter stated that we will use military action to take back all of our land. That was the charter of the PLO and also Al-Fath. And when the PLO was recognized as the international representative and the sole representative of the Palestinian people on the international stage, then after that actual official recognition by the world, then the PLO began to soften their stance towards a peaceful solution. And they also announced that they were now willing and ready to accept the principle of step-by-step phased solutions. Like, we will sit at the negotiating table, and we are willing to accept different phases of a solution to this issue. Right? Step by step, we're looking for a peaceful resolution to the issue. So first, in the beginning, the charter mentioned that the only option we have is the military option. We're ready to fight to take all of our rights back. But now they softened up and they said, okay, step by step, we're ready to sit at the table and come to a solution that comes in phases. So look at this. Look at the change in the mentality, the shift in the attitude. Previously, the only solution was Israel should cease to exist. But now they accepted the establishment of a Palestinian state on part of Palestinian land. Basically, they're saying we agree to give the Jews a certain amount of the land, and they can have their state, they can have Israel, but we need a portion of the land for our independent state of Palestine. So basically, they're ready to accept a two-state solution. They were not ready to do that before. So the Arabs in general, they began to lose their commitment to the Palestinian cause. The Egyptians, the Syrians, the Lebanese, they began to lose their commitment to the Palestinian cause because now it had become a Palestinian issue. Let the PLO deal with it. That's their own issue, right? So before, the Arabs were pretty much united on this issue, but now they're kind of, giving that issue solely to the Palestinians, and they're withdrawing from that issue themselves. So see this shift in mentality that happened in the mid-1970s. Then in 1975, in April of 1975, a dangerous development occurred. That was the beginning of the Lebanese War. And this war lasted for 15 years, from 1975 to 1990, the Lebanese War. 15 years of war among different parties and factions in Lebanon. The Druze, the Christian Maronites, the Sunnis, the Shia. There was a big war between all of these factions. And the Palestinians in Lebanon became part of this conflict as well. And the Christian Maronites in Lebanon, they announced during this war that one of their goals was to eliminate the Palestinian presence in Lebanon. They're saying, what are the Palestinians doing in Lebanon? Why are we allowing them to launch their operations from our country? So the Christian Maronites, one of their goals in this war was to completely eliminate the Palestinian presence from Lebanon. So that led to battles against Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon. These Christian Maronites, they actually launched attacks on Palestinian refugee camps within Lebanon. Now, during this time period, there were some political victories that were occurring in the Arab world through the UN, right? So the UN, basically, they recognized the right of the Palestinians to have an independent state. They recognized the Palestinians' right to return. Those who were forced to leave Palestinian land, they have a right to return to that land. They have a right to restore their rights by all means, right? The UN recognized these things officially. And also, there was a resolution that was passed in 1975 in the UN declaring Zionism a form of racism. Because Zionism, what it actually is, it's Jewish supremacy. The ideology of Zionism is an ideology of Jewish supremacy, meaning Jews are superior to everyone else. That's what Zionism is. So it was recognized at that time by the UN as a form of racism. So there were some political victories, but on the other hand, there were a number of failures on the part of the Arabs as well, and there was a lot of pressure on the Palestinians from all of these fronts, right? So this was the situation in the mid-1970s, in 1975 to be exact. Then on March 5th, 1975, Al-Fath carried out an operation, a military operation, the Savoy operation in Tel Aviv. And in this operation, they were able to kill 50 Israeli soldiers. They killed 50 Israeli soldiers, and they also killed 50 civilians, right? And these guerrilla operations started again. And conflicts also continued in Lebanese territory as well. As we mentioned, these Lebanese Christians, these Maronites, they stormed a Palestinian refugee camp on June 14th, 1976, the next year. And they killed a number of Palestinian refugees in that camp. Then they besieged the Jisr al-Basha camp and also the Tal al-Za'tar camp in Lebanon. And they also took over several other Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon. Right? So this struggle between the Lebanese Christian Maronites and the Palestinians in Lebanon, it escalated. Right? And of course, the war in general in Lebanon was escalating as well between all of these factions. Right? The Christians, the Druze, the Sunnis, the Shias. Right? It was a huge conflict between all of these forces within Lebanon. Now, while all of these conflicts were taking place, a court in Israel recognized the right of Jews to pray in the courtyards of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. The Jews can go to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa anytime they want, and they can pray in the courtyards of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa whenever they wished. So this led to a lot of anger amongst the Muslims in Palestine, and it led to demonstrations, and it led to some violent clashes within Palestine. Also in 1976, some problems arose between the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, and the Syrian government. So there was some tension between the Palestinian Authority and Syria due to Syria's entry into Lebanon. Syria entered into Lebanon as well, and they sieged some Palestinian strongholds in Lebanon. And this disrupted the movement of Palestinian forces within Lebanon. So this caused tension between the PLO and the Syrian government as well, right? So this weakened the Palestinian effort from Lebanon as well. So now look, the Palestinian movement was hindered in Jordan from before. Now they're engaged with conflict with the Syrians. They're in conflict with Lebanon. Right? Their movement is very greatly restricted in Egypt, right? And within Palestine itself, there is severe repression at the hands of Israel. So from all angles, the Palestinians were being pressured, from the Arab countries and from within Palestine itself. So this was the situation in the mid to late 1970s. This was the situation of Palestine during that time. Inshallah, we'll stop there for today, bi'ithnillah. And we'll continue, inshallah, next week with more on the history of the Holy Land, bi'idhnillah. Jazakumullahu khaira wa barakallahu feekum. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.